6 wins on the bounce, and then struggled a little bit after that when we ended up in Moscow. You know, that was when Ocon was back on fine form. Ocon then had a really horrible weekend in Austria, didn't score a single point. So you look back over the course of the year, and each weekend is like a mini championship in itself.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And of course, you know, with Ocon having a tough time of it, that was when Verstappen really needed to really compress the advantage, and he didn't, to be fair, did he?
No, I mean, there was one race where he got a penalty, there was another race where he got involved in an incident, so it was damage limitation in the end, but we'll see how he fares in this round 26 of the championship. The green flag lap is underway. The car's released for one final opportunity to get some warmth into the Hankook tyres here before we get the race underway. Pole position to Tom Blomqvist, Max Verstappen alongside him. Second generation competitors both. Tom's dad, former World Rally Champion Stig, Max with his father Jos Verstappen here, former Grand Prix racer. The grid headed by Tom Blomqvist and Max Verstappen, with Antonio Giovinazzi third, Esteban Ocon fourth, Antonio Fuoco is fifth ahead of Felix Rosenqvist and his teammate Lucas Auer. Then it's the Carlin drivers, Jordan King, Ed Jones and Jake Dennis, ahead of Nicholas Latifi and Felix Sorales. Roy Nissany, who went off in qualifying and caused a red flag, ahead of Dennis van der Laar and Tatiana Calderon. Jules Shimkoviak outpacing Sean Galisle on the grid. Then it's Gustavo Menezes struggling ahead of Spike Goddard and Santino Ferrucci, with Alex Toril, Michele Beretta, Sandro Zella and Wing Chung Chang, aka Andy Chang, the Macanese driver in the championship for his first weekend, defecting from the British Series. He's at the back of the grid. Now, track conditions dry. We had some overnight rain, which means that in the earlier races today we've seen if people get onto the grass verge, there's virtually no traction and you become a passenger. The sun is breaking through again. At the end of the previous race this morning, it was starting to cloud over and get a bit grey and chilly. Now the sun is breaking through once again, and although there's always the threat of rain at the Nürburgring, it doesn't look like it is imminent, that is for sure. Depending on which weather forecast you find, and there are so many, you can always pick one that you like for this region. Rain looks less likely today than was initially feared, therefore for the Formula 3 teams, certainly for this first race today, race 2 of the weekend, it looks like it is going to be a dry race as the cars now work their way up onto the grid. It's not a warm day, I'm afraid, but it is dry and very breezy, as you can see from the flags. Now, whether those blustery conditions are going to have an effect on the aero of the cars at any point, we'll have to wait and see. So, up to the grid they come. One by one, staggered grid, of course, for the single-seater categories here at the Nürburgring. Sven Stopper, the race director, is the man in charge, and as soon as the last car, which is that of Andy Chang, has arrived in place, then we'll have the indication for the marshal on track that everybody's where they should be, and then red lights 5 will come on, and when all the lights go out, we are going to be in business. Yesterday's race went to the 35-minute time slot because it was wet. Today we should get to the 25 laps as the last couple of cars arrive in place. There is Max Verstappen, Van Amersfoort Racing, still running the car but in its new Red Bull colours. Into position at the back comes Andy Chang, and that flag says we are ready. So, round 26 of the FIA Formula 3 European Championship is about to get underway. 4 red lights, 5 red lights, go out now. Who makes the best start? It is not Blomqvist. Giovinazzi's away well, but Verstappen takes the race lead. Giovinazzi just cuts across and gets ahead of Blomqvist. Then he tries the outside line against Verstappen as they dive down to turn 1 with Ocon on the outside of Blomqvist as well. Ocon gets driven out wide. He's got the inside line for turn 2. Can he bag third place? He's still on the inside of Blomqvist. Verstappen leads the way. Giovinazzi, after a really good start, going with him. Blomqvist is third, then it's Ocon, then it's Fuoco with Auer and Rosenqvist next up, and Jordan King runs 8th as they work their way up to turn 2 for the first time. Verstappen then is now trying to edge away, and he's doing just that as they come to the hairpin. Fuoco defending, Rosenqvist is all over him. Auer to the inside of his teammate, and the Austrian goes ahead of the Swede under braking. Brave stuff, wheel to wheel, as Verstappen leads the way. He's getting away from Giovinazzi, but Blomqvist, the big loser off the start because he bogged down.
Yeah, an awful start from Tom Blomqvist, which gave the advantage to Giovinazzi, and Verstappen able now just to get up the road a little bit. You can see the gap that Verstappen is already beginning to build over Antonio Giovinazzi, and we get a better view of it here as we've got 2 side by side.
Here they come up towards the chicane. It's Verstappen leading the way then. Giovinazzi second, Blomqvist is third, 4th is Ocon, 5th is Fuoco, 6th then is Auer, 7th is King, 8th is Rosenqvist, and 9th was Ed Jones as Santino Ferrucci gets forced out of bit wide over the curb coming out of the chicane. Over the line then at the end of lap 1, it is Verstappen who leads the way. Going with him then as best he can is Giovinazzi, but he's 9/10 back at the end of the opening lap of the race. Jake Dennis there, look, pulls out of the draft in the background, has a look on the inside line heading down to turn 1. He's 10th and his target is Nicholas Latifi is ahead of him. Ed Jones has a go at Rosenqvist and right round the outside there goes Tatiana Calderon. Tremendous move. She's gained a place while all the squabbling was going on ahead of her. She was able to luck into that, but Calderon gains ground. So some drivers being aggressive, leaving the door open, and Tatiana Calderon makes full advantage of that ahead of Latifi and Jake Dennis. Really good move. Verstappen down to the hairpin. Esteban Ocon is 4th. Remember that he is the championship leader. His real rival is Verstappen. Sean Galal goes to the inside of Dennis van der Laar heading into the hairpin. Jules Simkowiak is behind. Galal goes through, gets ahead of the Dutchman. And now Jules Simkowiak tries to find a way through as Felix Morales gets all crossed up. That was a pretty good save. He was all over that curb and you saw how high it was as the car stepped down and really flicked him sideways.
Well, absolutely. So exciting, the first lap of this FIA Formula 3 European Championship. This is race 2 as Gustavo Meneses, I think that is there, having a go up the inside as they head towards the chicane and, well, not able to make that stick. Goes all over the grass and the curbs as well. And race stewards will be on that like a viper, won't they? They've got access to all the data, all the cameras. They can see exactly what's going on.
He got himself ahead of van der Laar and then just carried too much speed into the chicane and gave the place back. So he penalised himself. In effect, he's having another go, look, and up against the pit wall. Santino Ferrucci is defending from Spike Goddard. Here comes Simkowiak against his teammate Menezes down to turn 1. Menezes wants to attack van der Laar, but he's got to keep Simkowiak behind him. Then it's Ferrucci, then it's Goddard. Torelli's in that group as well, and so too is 22 Andy Chang up from the back of the grid. There is Felix Morales, who has got Sean Galal running with him. Morales is in 14th place, then Galal right on his tail. Up front, Verstappen leading now by 9/10 over Antonio Giovinazzi. He's not actually gaining much ground over the Italian, so he's keeping the margin pretty constant. 0.9 of a second is all it is between them as we work lap 3 out of 25 or 35 minutes depending on which comes first. But barring a safety car period, we should be good for laps here and not have to worry really about the time that the race will take. Let's have a look at 1 or 2 replays of the start. Tom Blomqvist then, pole position, and as the lights go out, bogs down, and look in contrast, Giovinazzi is away like a robber's dog, isn't he? Straight out of the blocks, round the outside, chops across the front of Tom Blom, then has a go on the outside of Verstappen down towards the first corner. Ocon thought he was going to buy into this. Blomqvist had other ideas. Let's have a look from another angle. Lights go out. Look at Verstappen's start compared to Blomqvist.
I know, absolutely.
A really sluggish getaway. So Verstappen with the line leads down to turn 1 and works his way through that sequence of corners into a lead. I suspect he's not going to lose now in this race. Blomqvist straight away having to go defensive. Giovinazzi gave it his best shot there to get up alongside at turn 1. The plan being that's the inside for turn 2, but he had to give way, had to yield, slot back in behind the Dutchman. And Ocon being forced out wide as well. So that was the first few corners of the race, and it was what gave Max Verstappen the race lead. He's not getting away hugely from Giovinazzi though. In the first sector of this lap, it was Giovinazzi who was ever so slightly faster by 7 thousandths of a second. For third place, what about Ocon having a go at Blomqvist? That gap is coming down just a little. We know that Esteban Ocon does not do losing awfully well, and a 4th place is not going to be great news for him. Yesterday he was 3rd in the rookie contest, but that was about all that was good for him. 6th place outright. Comes up towards the NGK chicane and then the Coca-Cola curve. He's certainly close enough to have a go at Blomqvist on the run to turn 1 if he's brave under braking. The leader Verstappen works his way now up over the timing line. Last time through the gap was 6/10. It's now 7/10 because Verstappen has just done the fastest lap of the race, so he's going for it now. Blomqvist to Ocon is 0.2 of a second. Blomqvist defends the inside line. Ocon needs to get the switch back if he can coming through turn 1. Can't do it. What about the inside line for turn 2? Can he outfox Blomqvist here? The two of them running absolutely together, and this is difficult for Ocon because as long as he's that close, he's sitting in the dirty air. It has that negative effect on his own aero. It makes the car slower and harder to drive, and if he can't find a way through really at the hairpin, he's going to have to drop back and recover again. Replay of the chicane, and that is Felix Rosenqvist, whose torrid season continues. Skips across the grass, loses a little bit of time, doesn't do much good to his tyres. Blomqvist is still ahead of Ocon, third and fourth, and fifth behind them is Antonio Fuoco, who is trying to join in as well. But there is Ocon, the Frenchman.
Now, Ocon with the position that he's in the points, if he banks points for P4, you know, is he going to drive this sensibly? He's had a couple of looks at Tom Blomqvist, as you've said, it's compromised his race pace being in that dirty air. Is he going to settle for P4 and bank in those points? Because that's going to be enough, isn't it? You know, Max Verstappen can win as long as Ocon stays in the points as we get towards the sharp end of this championship.
I think he's going to have to settle for fourth because overtaking is just so hard. It's going to be one of those situations where if he can force a mistake out of Blomqvist, then yes, it's worth doing. But I don't think he's going to get into any wheel banging if he can avoid that. You're absolutely right. Points are what will count, and Prema Power Team is an experienced enough squad to know how to advise its drivers in terms of how to win championships. So over the line, the gap between Blomqvist and Ocon up to 0.6 of a second as there. Look, Roy Nissany arrives on the back of Jake Dennis. Jake's weekend started badly with a pretty big off in free practice on Friday, did a lot of damage to the car, and he's never really bounced back from that, I'm afraid. He's had some really good weekends. This has not been one of them, and we're not seeing Jake go as well as we've come to expect of late. The Racing Steps Foundation driver, another Formula 3 rookie this year. There's Gustavo Menezes, who really had some good weekends in the summer, particularly at Spa, but likewise has struggled here this weekend, and he has had some Formula 3 experience from the German F3 Cup last year, so he's not ignorant of the cars or indeed the circuit. Going back to Ocon for a moment, he's just done the absolute best in Sector 1, so he's having another push.
Right, well, let's see what he can do. Roy Nissany we saw there in the Muka Motorsport colours. The K-Styler 24 supported Muka Motorsport, and they as a team, they've had a struggle all season long, haven't they? They've not shown the promise that we expected from them as Verstappen crosses the timing line, and Giovinazzi has taken a couple of tenths out of Verstappen. It's down to just half a second now, as running right across the gravel and the grass is Santino Ferrucci, who manages to cobble it all back together, getting very close to Jules Simkowiak in so doing, but manages to save it.
Esteban Ocon did the fastest lap of the race when he came over the line, and then Antonio Fuoco behind him went even faster. So they are both pressing on. Ocon is now half a second away from Blomqvist. Good little fight developing here. Look, Tatiana Calderon, who is in 10th place, so therefore in the points, ahead of Nicholas Latifi. Tatiana Calderon, who had that remarkable 5th place at Spa back in June, which is only an hour and a half away from here. So it's this region, seemingly, which she goes pretty well. Comes down towards the hairpin, Latifi, then it's Jake Dennis running in 12th place, and Roy Nissany 13th at the start of this lap.
It was a great move by Tatiana Calderon earlier on, wasn't it, to put her into that position. A great bit of driving. Yeah,
she's better than people give her credit for, I think. And one of the problems of such a competitive championship is if you're not winning, you just get overlooked. But there have been some good drives out of Tatiana. Yes, she's had some incidents, and they've not all been of her own making, as the lead gap has come down, hasn't it?
Yes.
Verstappen has got his mirrors full of Giovinazzi now. Can he have a go at turn 1? That really is the best place to try, and if you can't do it there, try and at least force your rival offline through the Mercedes arena. See how windy it is. You can see the trees blowing in the background as the leaders come over the timing line. It's a blustery old day, and the fastest lap has just been done by Blomqvist, who is in 3rd place. I wonder whether, if that breeze gets behind you, it's going to give you a bit of a push on and help in turn to do that fastest lap. In certain parts of the circuit, the wind may be a problem as you drive into it, but in others it might help you as it's behind you. Blomqvist then 3rd, but Giovinazzi 0.4 of a second down on Verstappen, the race leader now. He's pushing hard, but he's not staying close enough. He's not near enough, for example, to have a go down to the hairpin. He needs to try and get a mistake out of Verstappen. And in fairness, although a few were prevalent at the start of the season, really after Poe, Verstappen doesn't often put wheels wrong now.
No. And Giovinazzi, of course, you know, he'll go for a charge and a challenge, won't he? But then he will be compromised by being in the dirty air off the back of Max Verstappen. So he's just going to have a concerted go at various points, isn't he? And he's going to time them because he's now just increased, Verstappen has increased the margin just a little bit over Giovinazzi now. Tom Blomqvist then confirmation of the fastest lap from Tom Blom, as he's become known.
What Verstappen might also do, if he's really thinking about this, is just back it off for a lap or two, let Giovinazzi close on him, but also stack him back into the clutches of Blomqvist. And as Blomqvist attacks Giovinazzi, then Verstappen can up his pace and sprint away again. You've got to be really confident in yourself to go slower, to create a battle behind you. But it is possible that could be in the game plan. Verstappen is leading by 0.7 of a second now from Giovinazzi, from Blomqvist. Ocon Fuoco an hour to round out the top 6. King, Rosenqvist, Jones and here Calderon round out the point scorers. Tatiana Calderon is ahead of Latifi, then Dennis, then Nassani, then Galal as they come over the timing line. 8 laps of 25 are done. Down to turn 1, there's a challenge being made by Roy Nassani, but it comes to naught. Jake Dennis ahead, fending him off. I know I'm tempting fate by saying this as we work lap 9. We haven't had a single message about driving standards or anything in the race, and normally we get at least something about track limits or jump starts or whatever it might be, but nothing has come up on the computer to tell us of any drivers making indiscretions at all, which either means they are all impeccably well behaved or the system has crashed. So at the moment, let's go with the assumption that they're all being very well behaved. Track limits here, less of an issue. If you do run wide anywhere, you kind of penalise yourself. There's nowhere that you're really benefiting by running wide.
So last time round then, the margin between Verstappen and Giovinazzi remained the same at 7 tenths. Then it's 1.4 back to Tom Blomqvist. Tom Blomqvist just setting the fastest lap. Ocon looks like he's getting closer to Blomqvist now.
You might be right about that. He was good in the sectors last time. The leaders will come now past the pits with half a second between Verstappen and Giovinazzi. There is Ocon, who is now 4 tenths back from Blomqvist, who in turn is doing his best to inch up onto the tail of second place man Antonio Giovinazzi. So through the Mercedes arena they go, but it doesn't really matter what's going on behind Verstappen. Verstappen always gives you the feeling that he's in charge.
Yes, I think I would agree with that.
However close the others get, however quick they look in a sector at the moment, Verstappen has got something that he can just use to draw away. We saw this yesterday on occasions. Antonio Fuoco, we thought, right, he's fighting back. And then 2 corners later, Verstappen's upped his pace again and just edged away. So driving within himself potentially is the leader, the Dutchman. And you forget that Verstappen is in his first year of car racing, because he does look like a far more experienced driver than that.
Which touched on yesterday how thrilled he'll be that the Red Bull Association has come his way as we look at Roy Nassani there. But with that comes a huge degree of pressure as well, because you have to perform. As you've said, they are utterly ruthless, Red Bull, in terms of their the drivers that they support.
I still think there's a book to be written. Might be taking on the job myself yet, because the story of Red Bull and its drivers, and those that have prospered and those that have really struggled after dropping off the scheme, has been a long one. Now, somebody made a mistake there going into the chicane. It was Sean Galile, and there he is. He's gone through the other chicane up the escape road, hops back on ahead of Dennis van der Laar and almost drives him off the road. That was very silly by Sean Galile, because he never had the speed to hang on to that place. He should have just given it up without being quite so aggressive about it, because that was never on. There is Roy Nassani. Have a look behind. Galile completely missed his braking point. He was off the road. He's in the tyre stack. Crikey, that was quite a thump, wasn't it? And he'll be lucky to have got away without any real suspension damage. And then, either oblivious or uncaring about where Dennis van der Laar was, almost drove him off the road there. Van der Laar, quite rightly, gets ahead, but Sean Galile should have been a bit more aware of what was going on around him, I think, there.
Well, as we look at Esteban Ocon on the back of Tom Blomqvist now, I said just a lap or so ago, I thought that Ocon was getting ever closer now, and I wonder if he's just warming himself up for going to have a bit of a charge to try and wrestle P3 away from Tom Blomqvist. There, the last 3 laps, you can see the difference in the margin between the two, as Ocon has gradually got just a little bit closer to Tom Blomqvist as they head now. As under braking through the NGK chicane, Ocon once again gets very, very close. Now it's here as he needs to be close, as he just takes a dive and a look up the inside. Turn 1 is the place where he probably needs to do it, and I rather think having a look there has compromised him being close enough to be able to do it into turn 1 perhaps.
I think you're right, because he's lost a length, hasn't he? And you can't afford to do that. Coming down to turn 1, he's got to try and make a mistake, come from Blomqvist. Into the braking area they come. Over the timing line, he was 4 tenths back, not close enough. And Blomqvist has the perfect line through the corner, so there's no mistake coming. And Ocon's got to be mindful as well that Antonio Fuoco is not that far behind him. We are on lap 12 of 25. There is Ocon, look, closing up at turn 3. Can he make a run up the inside down to the hairpin? It is so hard to overtake in these cars, and that's why making a mistake come from your rival is so important. Giovinazzi's having another go at Verstappen. He can push, he can close, he gets in the dirty air, he drops back.
Yes. So there is our race leader, Max Verstappen, going through. That was the battle for P3 that we're watching at the moment between Tom Blomqvist and Esteban Ocon. But as you pointed out, now getting onto the back of those is Fuoco. And Fuoco is going to be joining in this party any moment now as they head up towards the chicane. Now Giovinazzi right on the back of Max Verstappen. Is this ploy by Verstappen working in terms of just allowing them to get a little bit closer so that the battles behind it close up and then Verstappen is able just to disappear into the distance? Absolutely sure about that.
I'm always delighted when something I have said proves me wrong. Can I pass you to our judicial correspondent? Finally, we have news, Dave.
Yes, indeed. Santino Ferrucci then gets a black and white flag for a dangerous manoeuvre.
Thank you so much. Right, the lead gap has come right down to a gnat's crotchet now between Verstappen and Giovinazzi, but Giovinazzi got the power down a bit too keenly going into turn 2 and the car slid a little bit, so Verstappen will have brought himself back to some of that lost ground, and then going through turn 4 now you can see that he has sprinted away once more. Down to the hairpin they go. So you've got Verstappen once more just being able to extend this advantage. Fuoco getting closer to Esteban Ocon as well.
Yes, I really think Fuoco is the one to watch here. I think he's really buying into this now. The more I watch this and the more Giovinazzi gets into the dirty air behind Verstappen, I think Verstappen is controlling this very cleverly.
Indeed so. He was the man that started second on the grid. He missed out on the top time by just over a tenth of a second, but after Blomqvist's POC start, Verstappen has been in control, hasn't he, from that first corner? And again, he's got himself away from Giovinazzi on the run up towards the chicane. There is Blomqvist in third. Is he getting a little bit nearer? Because Blomqvist was quicker than Giovinazzi in sector 1 and quicker than Giovinazzi in sector 2. And he's also, in the process of doing that, extended his advantage over Esteban Ocon. Here they come to the end now of lap number 13. Over the timing line goes the race leader, Max Verstappen. Giovinazzi now is 0.6 of a second back, and is he falling away slightly into the clutches of Blomqvist? Well, Blomqvist is 7 tenths behind. It's Ocon that's really dropped off the back, and now the battle is developing for second place, isn't it? There's a double helping of tasty chicken now, because you've got the two Jagonia I Am teammates together almost. Giovinazzi ahead of Blomqvist, and for the bulk of the season, Blomqvist has been the pace setter out of those 3 yellow cars of him, Galal and Giovinazzi. Since the Red Bull Ring, Giovinazzi has really started to remind people of his pace, and Blomqvist, for pride alone, wants to be ahead of him.
Yes, and we'll see how this develops, because there's no doubt about it that Giovinazzi as you say, following the Red Bull Ring has started to look more like the Giovinazzi we thought. Antonio Fuoco is still trying to reel in Ocon ahead of him. There they are, the top 5, all fairly spread out, because Max Verstappen is controlling this nicely at the front, isn't he? 6 tenths last time over the timing line. I think the closest of the two is, as you rightly say, between Blomqvist and Giovinazzi now.
And just to look further down the order, behind Ocon, who is 4th, you've got Fuoco 5th, Auer 6th, 7th is Jordan King, 8th is Felix Rosenqvist, 9th is Ed Jones, 10th is Tatiana Calderon, still therefore hanging on to the final championship point, and in turn keeping a long, long line of cars at bay as they come over the line. So with now the cars working lap 15 out of the 25 in what's been a remarkably calm race. We hardly had a car off the road apart from Ferrucci and perhaps that little error by Sean Gallar, but there aren't that many others. Oh no, Rosenqvist had a grassy moment, didn't he? Up front, Verstappen leading the way, looking oh so good. Calderon shaking off Latifi, and into the pit lane has just come Jake Dennis. Now, I said early on this has not been a great weekend. Jake was a retirement in yesterday's race. It's not for a penalty as far as we are aware, so it's a mechanical problem seemingly that has brought the Brit into the pit lane, and there he is. And the Carlin guys go to work, but with not, in fairness, much urgency. They know that this is a car that is, if it's going anywhere, it's going into a test session for a final few laps in the race.
Yes, Jake having a tough time of it, isn't he?
Yeah, he's better than his results have made him look on occasions this year. And it's a shame, but the Racing Steps Foundation, which is there to help and promote young British drivers, standing by him. There is Roy Nissany, the Israeli, who had an off in qualifying, but at the moment is in 12th place. He is another of the Lucas Motorsport drivers heading now towards the NGK chicane. But Max Verstappen looking for win number 9 at the moment. He and Esteban Ocon are on 8 apiece. And this is a replay of Sean Galal coming out of the hairpin, and he gets it onto the curb and he loses the back, and he puts a huge amount of rubber down on the ground. Autographs the circuit nicely there, doesn't he?
That's rather. Manages on that occasion not too close to anyone else in his recovery. So there is Esteban Ocon in P4. and Antonio Fuoco chasing him down at P5. And the difference between Ocon and Fuoco has kind of been the same for the last few laps, really, hasn't it? Ocon is controlling his position, isn't he? And
that's right.
You know, he is in this situation where, of course, he would love to push Blomqvist into making a mistake, but he's certainly not close enough to be able to do that, because he's focusing on the fact that he knows he's got Fuoco behind him. And there you can see over the last 3 laps, the graphics there indicating the difference between the two.
But what's going on here with Esteban Ocon? Because yesterday he didn't look sparkling.
No.
He was, by his high standards only, 4th on the grid. He didn't make a lightning start. He can't do anything about making progress now. Okay, you can offer me that thought that he's banking the points for 4th place, which I accept, but he just doesn't look quick, or as quick as normal, does he?
And equally, his demeanour would not suggest he's going to be someone that's ever going to be happy just banking points.
Precisely.
I know what you've said as we see a very disappointed Jake Dennis walk away from the car. Of course, you remember that Twitter picture from the Red Bull ring when Jake, one of his roll-offs got into the air intake of the car. I mean, you know, when it's not with you, it really isn't. And poor Jake, no, it's really hasn't been going well for Jake Dennis. We're on lap 16 of 25. So yes, back to the demeanour. You know, everything about Ocon, for me, suggests that he is a winner and wants to be a winner all the time. Okay, is it Prema that are managing him and saying, right, this is what you need to do?
It could be, but equally, you know, he'd like to be, I'm sure, a bit nearer to those ahead and see if he can force a mistake and gain another position out of them. Yeah, poor Jake Dennis, another retirement. As you say, it was at the Red Bull ring where somebody else's rip-off fires that got into his air intake. He doesn't even use them, so, you know, Murphy's Law that it's somebody else's that the engine swallowed and did for him. Sean Galisle locking up. We've already seen him have a spin, and now he gets it wrong going into turn 1. Sort of overcooked chicken, that, wasn't it? As he locks up and heads into the corner, loses out to Jules Szymkowiak.
He's had a few moments as Sean, hasn't he?
Yeah, but he had one yesterday, even before the race started. He had been given a penalty because he sped on his way onto the grid. He was so excited to get into the race, bless him, that he was given a drive-through penalty for speeding even before the race had started. Hey-ho.
Back to this story then of Verstappen controlling this race. 5/10 the gap between Verstappen and Giovinazzi. It's 1.2 back to Tom Blomqvist in P3. Then we see Ocon and Fuoco and Lucas Auer, King. Then it's Rosenqvist P8, Jones P9, and Tatiana Calderon still there in the points, P10.
Fair play. There is her Motorsport teammate, Felix Rosenqvist, who I think will look back on 2014 as a season to forget. It has just not been the year he needed for his career progression. Giovinazzi is having another crack here, isn't he, at Verstappen? So he's had a breather. He is now pushing, and he has to, because look, Blomqvist is not that far behind, and Ocon is also closing up as well. So suddenly the dynamic of that leading quartet looks very different indeed. In slow-mo, Verstappen working his way through the Schumacher S, the Van Amersfoort Racing Run car, now with his Red Bull colour scheme. There's Esteban Ocon, championship leader, bouncing himself over the curb at the chicane.
That group of 4 have now increased their margin over Fuoco, haven't they? They've kind of left Fuoco a bit. So there you can see the Van Amersfoort logo on the back of the Verstappen car.
Over the line he comes, and that now puts 18 laps in the book as they come past the pits. And what is the gap? It's half a second, then it's 7/10 back to Blomqvist. 1.8 covering the leading 4 now. But Giovinazzi much, much closer at turn 1, isn't he?
Yes, he is, as this group of 4 have broken away from Antonio Fuoco, and Fuoco himself is going to have Lucas Auer for company, isn't he? In the not too distant future.
Strange line from Ocon there in contrast to Blomqvist. He had a look on the inside, but he was never anywhere near close enough for that to be a proper move. But again, maybe that's just to try to out-psych Blomqvist as he comes down to the hairpin, and certainly Ocon now looks a little bit nearer. So this is another of those situations where you can push and you get closer, but until that dirty air starts to affect you, you're looking good. So really, he needs to start doing this towards the end of the lap and try and get up behind Blomqvist on the run to turn 1 and force something to happen through the Mercedes arena. Blomqvist runs a bit wide up over the curb there.
So heading up towards the NGK chicane they go now. This group of 4, and Ocon really closes into under braking to the back of Tom Blomqvist. Now this is where he needs to get up close and start to set up the charge that he could make into turn 1. He made the mistake by trying to do it through this final turn a few laps ago, but it's now that he really needs to be on the back of Blomqvist and try and force a slight error at Blomqvist. He's not close enough to be able to do anything.
Absolutely right. We've now done 19 laps, so Giovinazzi for the lead, Blomqvist for second, Ocon for third. They're running out of time now in which they can really do anything about gaining track position. They have spent the last 19 laps struggling to do it. They're running out of ideas. Ocon, look, is inching up again onto the back of Blomqvist, but here you have one of those perennial problems at certain circuits in a Formula 3 race where overtaking is so difficult. You're getting in the dirty air all the time, and if the guy ahead of you is making no mistakes, then life really does become so difficult to find a way through. It's just clouded over a little bit again, which means that as the ambient temperature drops, so there's a little bit more power for the engines to generate now. But if that's happening for everybody, then you're not going to gain that way either. There, fifth is for Ocon, and he's never quite caught a line, has he? Even though, and I agree with you, a few laps ago it looked like he might have done something about Ocon. That's never quite happened either.
No, and he runs wide now and runs into the gravel, and that will play into the hands of Lucas Auer, who is desperately trying to get into that battle. And what's happened here?
Verstappen's got a problem. He slowed right down. We saw this, didn't we, earlier on in the season at Moscow? He had a mechanical problem and had to retire from the race. And Max Verstappen, with smoke coming out of the back of the car, is heading for the pit lane. And win number 9 has got away from him, because as he comes now in towards the pit lane, the car has ground to a halt. 8 wins to his name, and Max Verstappen, who had dominated this race, is limping into retirement. And that, I'm afraid, is another of these occasional situations where the team has let him down. He's not thrown it off the circuit, he's not crashed, he's not done anything. There's the smoke from the back of the car.
That's what I saw.
That's a Volkswagen engine that has let go, seemingly. And so now Giovinazzi leads from Blomqvist, and Ocon not only is on the podium, but his championship rival is not going to score a bean. It hasn't even got to the team, look. That's Verstappen. That is a very sorry sight, and you've got to say that Van Amersfoort has got a bit of previous this year, because remember at the start of the season, the Nürburgring, he had a problem, didn't even get to the grid when he was on pole. Moscow, mechanical problem, it was the alternator, wasn't it, there, that died on him, put him out of the race. You saw that smoke come from the engine, and so Verstappen has just expired in the pit lane, and he's trying to get the car out of the way. He's got the presence of mind, even though he's hugely disappointed, he's got the presence of mind to get the car to a safer place, even before the marshals get to him. Sean Galal, we've not seen for a lap or two. He locks up as he goes up the inside of Felix Serralles. Does he harpoon him into the corner? Oh, yes he does. Crunch. He turns around the Puerto Rican, gives him another biff to get him out of the way, takes his nose cone off. Look at this. Sean Galal's arms everywhere in all of that as he tried to turn through the corner. It was like an octopus undoing a bra. In the end, he gets away with it, but he's done damage to both, and I would imagine the stewards are going to want a little word with that. Look at that. Wipes the wing off Serralles' car, possibly does his suspension a power of no good as well.
The incident is certainly under investigation, and
oh, really?
I don't think it's going to be too difficult, is it? Sorry to be so flippant, but do you know what? You can't help but feel for that guy, because you're right. There is a bit of history there with Van Amersfoort and things going wrong, and so feel for Max there, because he hadn't put a foot wrong in the entire race. He'd really controlled it, and now he's having to push his own car back into the.
And without sounding flippant about this, that's almost one of the best sights of the season, by way of showing how mature Max Verstappen is. There's no tantrum.
No.
There's no throwing his gloves or helmet. He's helping the marshals push the car to a safe place and out of the way. He's not stalked away in a big huff. That shows the maturity of the guy, for my money. And although, as we've said over the course of this season, Esteban Ocon has been a star, so too has Max Verstappen. They're both Formula 3 rookies, but Max Verstappen, in his first year of car racing, has got no Formula Renault race knowledge to pull on in the same way that Ocon has to the same level. And so what Verstappen has done is arguably more meritorious than what Ocon has done. And Felix Serralles has had a pretty horrible season, and it has got no better. So, we are now on lap 23 of 25. Antonio Giovinazzi is the race leader. Blomqvist is second. Ocon is third. Then it's for Woco, and from the steward's room, Dave.
Car number 20 gets a drive-through penalty for causing a collision. Quelle surprise. So Sean Galal then will be taking a drive-through penalty. That's what he's been been given. As from the comms booth window, I can see Max Verstappen now that the Van Amersfoort team have got hold of the car. He does now walk away. Just looking to see if I can see Jos walking down the pit lane. Not sure I saw Jos Verstappen yesterday. He's been at every event.
Yeah, he was certainly here on Friday.
Well,
but Max Verstappen is going to take quite some consoling, saying, "It's down to me." And the Van Amersfoort squad know that they've let down their man here. Television crews intercept him, but I don't think Max is in a huge desire to talk at the moment, but he may have to. So back on track, here are the 3 becoming 4 for the race lead, and Esteban Ocon then now breathes a sigh of relief because these points have been gifted to him. Not only the points for 3rd, but that 0 that will go next to Max Verstappen's name.
He will be rubbing his hands with invisible soap, won't he? Because it has been gifted to him. So Giovinazzi, Blomqvist, Ocon, Fuoco P4, then it's Al, then it's King, Felix Rosenqvist P7, and then it should be Ed Jones to cross the turning line to take P8. And then Tatiana Calderon up to P9 now because of Verstappen's retirement. So Tatiana Calderon having a good time with it.
Indeed so. And the driving standards flag and the drive-through penalty ball being given to Sean Galal, so that will be served soon. Race leader then on lap 24. Antonio Giovinazzi looks as though a 2nd victory, brackets a 3rd, because of course he won on the road in Austria, only to then have that taken away with a time penalty for lagging back too much behind the safety car. So it's going to be a 2nd proper win of the year as there his teammate Sean Galal serves the drive-through. He has been in the wars in this race. Now he meant to drive through, but I think he's perhaps, with the damage to the car, decided that enough is enough. He's had a couple of spins, he's been in the tyre stack, and he had that incident with Sorales, and there Verstappen suddenly slows and the engine sort of coughs its last, doesn't it? Sort of coughs out the smoke, and the Volkswagen power unit, I'd say it's Van Amersfoort that's lets down its man. It could be the Volkswagen engine, but it just seems that Verstappen has more mechanical dramas than others, doesn't it?
It does. And a very good point that you made, as we saw that image there of him trying to get the car to a position of safety and not compromise or harm anyone else. Just proves the boy's maturity, doesn't it? And in this, his 1st season of car racing, let's not lose sight of that. Giovinazzi then on target. That's for sure. Been gifted this opportunity by the retirement of Max Verstappen. Giovinazzi, Blomqvist, Ocon, Fuoco, the top 4.
And this is the last lap of the race as they work their way now through the Mercedes arena. Esteban Ocon getting ever closer to that championship. There are 75 points a weekend on offer, but we only have 2 more weekends. There is Imola in October, so it's quite a long break after the 3rd race here before you go to the next event at Imola. And then in less than a week's time after that, they're going to be racing at Hockenheim at the end of the season. It would be great if the championship fight went down to the last weekend, but it needs a bit more bad luck for Ocon and a bit of good luck for a change for Max Verstappen. And if you think about all the mechanical dramas and the accidents that he's had and give him some points back from that, it will be far closer in the championship.
Yes, you're right.
He has never given up fighting. But in this race, Antonio Giovinazzi, who did try his best to get onto the back and rattle an error out of Verstappen, is going to come through as a race winner. It's going to be a 2nd victory of the season. Antonio Giovinazzi comes up towards the line. The checkered flag is waved. Giovinazzi wins. 2nd over the line is Tom Blomqvist. It's a 1-2 for Carlin, and Esteban Ocon takes 3rd ahead of his Prema Power Team mate Antonio Fuoco. Then it is Lucas Auer for Nuka, and in 6th place another of the Carlin drivers, Jordan King. But Antonio Giovinazzi, 2nd year Formula 3 racer in Europe, comes home as the race winner by 0.7 of a second from Tom Blomqvist. Esteban Ocon rounds out the podium finishers, and he will have seen Max Verstappen slow. He will know that he's outscored him. He may not know to what extent, but Ocon will be very, very relieved, that's for sure, to ultimately end up not only ahead of Verstappen, but scoring and Verstappen getting a 0 for that race. Real disappointment for Verstappen. And it was a bit of a present, wasn't it? A bit of a gift as far as Esteban Ocon is concerned. So his championship lead will increase, because for that 3rd place he will score 15 points. So he outscores and extends the advantage over Verstappen by a further 15 going into race 3 here this weekend. Esteban Ocon, part of the Lotus Junior driver programme, Antonio Fuoco picked up by Ferrari for its driver academy, and as we've been mentioning, Max Verstappen part of the Red Bull programme. And the relationship started so well yesterday with a race win for Max. It looked like it was going well today, but then that mechanical drama, and we'll get to the bottom of it, I'm sure, putting him out of the race. But with 4 or 5 laps to go, Verstappen, who had dominated the race, becomes a retirement, and jubilation for Carlin in contrast. Antonio P1, Tom P2, as Giovinazzi scores the win and Blomqvist finishes second. The Jagonia I Am element of Carlin, absolutely delighted with the 1-2. Sean Gallile, in contrast, I'm afraid didn't get to the end. He did retire in the pit lane with the damage. So Sean's father that is behind Jagonia I Am, and that sponsorship put Sean in racing. But fair play, it is also responsible for putting Tom Blomqvist and Antonio Giovinazzi on the grid, because neither of them have a proper budget. Tom Blomqvist was part of Red Bull's programme for a time, but the results weren't coming, so he was quickly dropped. And without that Jagonia I Am money, they just would not be on the grid. So fair play to the Galliles for not just getting their son on the grid, but also giving Blomqvist and Giovinazzi another season of racing, and they've repaid that by wins.
Absolutely, and we made the point there of the Red Bull Association, and that being that Tom was dumped from that programme, that they are utterly ruthless, and if the results don't come, then you don't stay in that programme for very long. So Giovinazzi celebrates, and
it's a double helping of sizzling chicken, tasty chicken, isn't it? The 2 Jagonia I Am drivers, first and second. Antonio Giovinazzi, who was a Formula 3 racer last year, both in Europe and in the British F3 International Series. Tom Blomqvist, who we first saw in Formula Renault in the UK. His father, Stig Blomqvist, former World Rally champion. Interesting that Tom, who spent most of his early days in New Zealand, has gone the circuit racing route rather than following Dad into rallying, although in fairness, Stig Blomqvist himself has done quite a lot of racing and rallycross. Vincenzo Sospiri there comes to congratulate Antonio Giovinazzi. Vincenzo here running AutoGP teams this weekend, but congratulating his fellow countryman. And Antonio Giovinazzi will now make his way up to the podium. So we heard the one about the Italian, the Brit and the Frenchman, because that's what you're going to have. Giovinazzi, Blomqvist, who, thanks to a British mum, is now a British citizen and therefore carries a British race licence, even though his dad's Swedish. And Esteban Ocon, the French driver, will be there as well. Antonio Fuoco with a piece of paper in his hand, which would seem to suggest a penalty. Now, has something developed post-race? Looking at the timing screen, nothing for Prema Power Team during the course of the race, but then a piece of paper in hand, unless that's anything to do with having just come from scrutineering. Anyway, race results of round 26. Antonio Giovinazzi scores the race win ahead of Tom Blomqvist and Esteban Ocon, with Antonio Fuoco 4th from Lucas Auer, Jordan King, Felix Rosenqvist, Ed Jones, Tatiana Calderon, and then Nicholas Latifi round out the scorers. Of those that are a long way down in the end, Gustavo Menezes perhaps is one that could have done better, and those that didn't get to the end, Galal, Sorales, also Verstappen, and disappointingly Jake Dennis. So let's have a look at the podium finishers, because Esteban Ocon, who we'd been talking about struggling making any progress from 4th, really got lucky, didn't he? He inherited 3rd after Verstappen's demise and therefore extends his championship lead by 15 points. Tom Blomqvist on the podium once more. He takes 2nd place in the Jagonia I Am Carlin Run Volkswagen powered Dallara. But Antonio Giovinazzi, who had stared at the back of Verstappen for 3/4 of the race, eventually finds himself staring at the checkered flag as the race winner, and now will head to the top step of the podium. Antonio Giovinazzi is the race winner, and in the end, his winning margin, 0.7 of a second. He will be a very happy man indeed, that is for sure, as he stands atop the car and celebrates in Parc Fermé. Yes, Antonio Fuoco, who we saw with a piece of paper in his hand, had been to the driver's weighing area. I think that was the piece of paper he had in his hand to say that everything was good after the driver's weigh checks are done at the end of the race. So for the championship, Esteban Ocon now on 402 points against the 310 of Max Verstappen. Tom Blomqvist 3rd ahead of Lucas Auer, then it's Fuoco. Giovinazzi creeping into the picture ahead of King, Rosenqvist, Dennis and Nicholas Latifi.
We've mentioned many times, haven't we, Max Verstappen and his chances to encroach and close the gap to Esteban Ocon in the points. shouldn't lose sight of the fact what's happening behind Verstappen as well. Of course, we have another Formula 3 race to come later today, so looking forward to that. Well, Verstappen, I suspect, will be seeking some answers. This was the moment that the engine seemingly let go. We saw that first puff of smoke, didn't we? And there he is being, well, them trying to console him from Van Amersfoort. Clearly he was inconsolable. And unfortunately, and I think you're so right here, David, there have been a number of mechanical woes, haven't there? And therefore his tolerance of said mechanical problems has probably reached its very limit now, hasn't it?
Indeed, and of course drivers pay to be in this. I know Red Bull is now putting in some money, but largely you have to find the budget to go racing, and if you're delivering and the team is letting you down, then of course questions have to be asked. We may be being unfair to Van Amersfoort because it could have been a Volkswagen engine failure rather than bad preparation on the team's part, so it may be that I'm being a bit unfair to Van Amersfoort, but it's not the first time, sadly, that is a car that's retired from a round of the championship this year with something mechanical going wrong. Great shot looking down onto the area near the Nürburgring as the drivers then are now ready to make their way out onto the podium after round 26 of the championship, and it is Antonio Giovinazzi who will lead the drivers on to the 3 victory steps. So Antonio Giovinazzi scores the race win. Out he comes to celebrate his race win. Tom Blomqvist, his Carlin teammates, and Trevor Carlin, I can see just in shot there, is here to cheer his men to the echo. Tom Blomqvist comes onto the podium now for second place and congratulates Giovinazzi, but almost through gritted teeth, because had he not made a bad start, it could be him on the top step. And wow, Esteban Ocon third and smiling. Now that is not something you see very often. That, I suspect, is largely because he knows what's happened to Verstappen. But Antonio Giovinazzi it is who stands on the top step. Carlin is represented there as a team and will now have the national anthem of the winning driver. I'm sure there's more, but the band forgot the tune, clearly. Antonio Giovinazzi it is who takes the race win, his second victory of the season, and the trophy to be presented to him by Martin Hunig, the motorsport director for Runtal, and Antonio Giovinazzi, a happy man. Tom Blomqvist ruining that bad start, clearly, finishing in second place, and Park Han-jun, the general manager of motorsport for Team Hankook, will first of all present the team's trophy. And Tom Blomqvist now to receive his second place trophy from Ravenol, and then Esteban Ocon at the far end of the podium is to receive his third place trophy from Park Han-jun. Hankook, big supporters of the DTM package as a whole, supplying tyres in Formula 3 and in the DTM touring car category as well. The drivers in the sunshine now get together on the podium. Trying to predict the weather here has been very, very difficult all weekend, and they have had a real mix of heavy rain for qualifying and practice, a greasy track for race 1, dry but very windy conditions for race 2. What have the weather gods got in store for later on? The drivers then together on the podium, and very shortly we'll have the rookie podium, which will be Esteban Ocon, Antonio Fuoco, and I think I'm right in saying Ed Jones for the top 3, but we'll confirm that in a moment when we get the drivers there. Esteban Ocon is not particularly in the mood to spray the Henkel Trocken, thank you very much, so I'm off. Or is he? Is he? Is he? I think he's been encouraged, yes. Stay and fight like a man, Esteban. So he does fight back, but Antonio Giovinazzi celebrating his race victory. That's enough, Tom, he says. I'm wet now. And Carlin taking a 1-2 We talk about how competitive the championship is, and in doing so we tend to think largely about the drivers, but you have got the likes of Carlin and Prema Power Team and Mucker, all with a good pedigree in single-seater racing, Formula 3 in particular, and Van Amersfoort as well, as perhaps not one of the top teams, but on the whole has done a good job this year. And then you've got the battle of the engine suppliers as well, largely Mercedes taking on Volkswagen, although the two NBE, Neil Brown Engineering units, are on the grid as well, still developing. But you've got these different fights. It's not just about the drivers, it's about the teams, it's about the engines, and then there's almost the internal fights as well. For example, satellite Carlin operations. You've got the Carlin works cars, as you might say, in the blue and white livery, the traditional Carlin colour scheme. Then you've got the Jagonia I Am squad as well, and each faction wanting to come out on top. There from the helicopter, the two roads you can see. On the left is the public road, on the right is the Nordschleife, which wriggles its way past the Döttinger Höhe Hotel down towards the Grand Prix circuit. And the band didn't quite play on because so windy is it that the equipment goes absolutely flying. So on track at the moment we have the manufacturer's laps and the taxi